Welcome back to Health Bulletin. You know, we often hear about the odds of having a boy or a girl being, well, basically 50-50, right? Like a simple coin toss.
Exactly. That's the common wisdom.
But what if that misses something? A more complex reality, perhaps.
Well, that's what we're digging into today. There's some fascinating new research suggesting that for individual families, the odds might not be quite so simple after all.
Okay, interesting. So what's our mission today then?
Our mission is to really unpack a groundbreaking study. It challenges this long-held belief that the biological sex of your child is purely random, like that coin toss.
Right.
We'll explore why, maybe at the family level, it's not so straightforward, and what factors might be playing a surprising role. Things like maternal age, maybe even genetics.
Fascinating stuff. And this isn't just speculation, it's based on solid research.
Oh, yeah. Very solid.
Right.
This deep dive is built around a specific research article published just recently, July 18th, 2025, in Science Advances. It's titled, "Is Sex at Birth a Biological Coin Toss? Insights from a Longitudinal and GWS Analysis." Quite a title.
It certainly sets the stage. And who conducted this work?
It was a team effort. Researchers included Cian Wang, Bernard A. Rosner, and the study was led by epidemiologist Dr. Jorge Chavarro.
And where was this research done? Which institutions?
They're based at some really prominent places. We're talking the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and also Harvard Medical School. So top-tier institutions.
Definitely. And the data they used, you mentioned it was comprehensive.
Incredibly so. The foundation for this investigation is really robust. They leverage data from two huge ongoing cohort studies, one in the U.S., one in Canada.
Which ones were those?
The Nurses Health Study 2, or NHSII, which actually started way back in 1989.
Wow.
And the Nurses Health Study 3, NHS3, which launched more recently in 2010. These are, some of the largest, longest-running fertility databases anywhere in the world.
That's a massive amount of data. How many people are we talking about?
The researchers meticulously analyzed data from over 58,000 U.S. women, specifically 58,007 women who'd had at least 2 singleton live births.
Okay.
And that covered a remarkable number of pregnancies, 146,064 pregnancies, occurring over a long period between 1956 and 2015.
So decades of information.
Exactly. And this huge data set allowed for this incredibly detailed look at patterns, sibling sex patterns within families, alongside things like the mother's age and, crucially, their genetic information too. Okay,
so let's start with that baseline assumption. Most of us, learned in school that sex at conception is, well, simple. Binomial distribution.
Right, the 50-50 shot.
Like a random coin toss. It all boils down to whether the sperm carries an X or a Y chromosome. That's the classic textbook view.
It is, and that's precisely what this new study is questioning. Their core finding reveals that offspring sex in their data actually followed something called a beta binomial distribution.
Beta binomial?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds a bit more technical than a simple coin toss.
It is, yeah.
What does that actually mean for us, for the listener? Why is that distinction important here?
Well, what's really insightful about the beta binomial model is it suggests that each family isn't necessarily flipping a perfectly fair coin every single time.
Ah, okay.
Imagine, some families might be flipping a coin that's just slightly weighted towards heads, boys in this case. Others might have one slightly weighted towards tails or girls.
So it's not changing the overall odds in the population.
Exactly. This isn't about suddenly having more boys or girls overall. The population sex ratio stays pretty close to 50-50, but it means that your specific family's coin, so to speak, might have its own unique slight tilt.
I see.
The beta binomial distribution just fits the observed data better because it allows for that probability to vary between different families. It makes it much more representative of what they actually saw in these nurses' families.
Okay, so it's like a personalized weighted coin at the family level. That's a really key distinction.
Yeah.
And did the data actually show these patterns clearly?
Oh, yes. The data really supported this idea. For instance, they found that roughly 1 in 3 families in their huge analysis had children who are all the same sex. So all boys or all girls.
1 in 3, that's quite a lot.
It is. And while having a mix, like a boy then a girl or a girl then a boy, that was the most common pattern in families with just 2 children, which makes sense.
Sure.
But a clustering of kids of the same sex, that became significantly more frequent in families that had 3 or more children.
Right. That's where the patterns really start to emerge.
Yeah.
You mentioned these single-sex families were overrepresented in larger families.
Exactly. Overrepresented compared to what simple 50-50 probability would predict, especially in families with 3, 4, or even 5 children.
And this wasn't just a slight difference.
No, no. The magnitude of this deviation, this overrepresentation, it actually increased as the family size got bigger. And the statistical evidence was, well, incredibly strong.
How strong?
They used statistical tests, chi-square tests, and found the deviation from that simple coin toss model was highly significant for all family sizes they looked at. The p-values, which basically tell you the chance of seeing this pattern randomly, were all less than 0.001.
Less than 0.1% chance it was random luck.
Okay, that's compelling.
Very compelling. But it does raise an important question, doesn't it?
Which is?
Could this just be behavior? What researchers sometimes call coupon collection behavior.
Coupon collection. What does that mean in this context?
It's the idea that parents might consciously or unconsciously stop having children once they achieve a mix of sexes they desire. You know, we've got one of each, let's stop now.
Ah, right. Like collecting coupons for one boy and one girl. So how did this study account for that? It seems like that could definitely skew the numbers.
It's a really clever point, and they did address it directly. They ran sensitivity analyses. One key thing they did was to conservatively exclude each woman's last birth from the analysis.
Glide the last birth. Because that's the point where the decision to stop having children is most likely to be influenced by the existing family composition, by that coupon collection idea.
Okay. That makes sense. And what happened when they removed that potential behavioral bias?
This is where it gets really interesting. The surprising result was that the deviations from the simple 50-50 model were actually more pronounced, stronger, when they accounted for this coupon collection behavior.
More pronounced. So taking out the behavior made the biological pattern stronger.
Exactly. It suggests there's an underlying biological tendency, a propensity towards one sex or the other in some families, that parents might even be sort of subconsciously counteracting by stopping once they get their desired mix.
Wow. So the biology might be pushing one way and parental choice is sometimes pushing back, masking the full effect.
Yeah.
That's quite revealing.
It is. And they didn't just look at their own data. They brought in some historical context, too.
Ooh. Like what?
They looked at a huge data set from the UK Biobank, over 330,000 families with kids born between 1940 and 1970. In that group, they actually saw an underrepresentation of single-sex families.
Underrepresentation, so the opposite.
Yes, which fits perfectly with that coupon collection idea being strong during that period, parents actively stopping once they had, say, a boy and a girl.
Okay.
But then they contrasted that with historical Dutch families from way back 1600 to 1939, and there they found an overrepresentation of single-sex families.
Fascinating. So different eras, different patterns.
Exactly. It really highlights this complex interplay between potential underlying biology and changing societal preferences or family planning behaviors over time and across cultures.
Okay, so if the math points towards this weighted coin, what biological factors in the mother might actually be adding that weight? Let's dig into the maternal factors they explored.
Yeah, this is a key part. The study specifically looked at maternal age at the time of her first birth.
And what did they find there?
They found a link. Older maternal age at first birth was associated with higher odds of having children of only one sex, either all males or all females.
How much higher? Was it a big effect?
It was statistically significant. To be precise, women who were over 28 when they had their first child had slightly higher odds. The odds ratio was 1.13 of having single-sex offspring compared to women who were younger, under 23, at their first birth.
Okay, a modest but clear association. Now, the big question, why? Do we have any ideas, even speculative ones, about the biological mechanism behind that?
Well, this is where it gets a bit speculative, but the researchers point to potential physiological changes that happen as women age.
Listen.
Things like changes in the menstrual cycle, specifically a shorter follicular phase,
Yeah.
or maybe changes in the vaginal environment, like a lower pH, meaning it becomes more acidic.
Right. And how might those affect the chances of having a boy or a girl?
The hypotheses floating around are, well, a shorter follicular phase might somehow favor the survival or success of Y chromosome sperm, the ones that lead to boys. Conversely, a more acidic vaginal environment, which can sometimes develop later in reproductive life, might potentially give an edge to X chromosome sperm, the ones for girls. The thinking is X sperm might be a bit larger, maybe more resilient in those conditions.
Interesting. So subtle shifts in the mother's physiology over time could potentially influence which type of sperm is more successful. plausible mechanisms, even if speculative.
Exactly. Plausible, but needing more research.
Did they look at other maternal characteristics? Was there anything that didn't seem to be linked that's often just as informative?
Absolutely, and yes, they did. Importantly, when they did that analysis excluding the last birth to control for behavior, several other factors were not significantly associated with having single-sex kids.
Like what?
Things like the mother's race, her natural hair color, her ABO blood type, her height, her body mass index, or BMI at age 18, as even her age when she started menstruating, her age at menarche.
So it seems unrelated to those common physical traits. No support for old wives' tales about hair color or anything like that influencing sex.
Yeah, right. That helps narrow down the potential biological influences quite a bit. It's not just any random maternal factor.
Okay, so not just observable factors like age, but this study went deeper, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right into the genetics. That feels like the real cutting edge here.
It really is. They conducted what's called a genome-wide association study, a GWAS.
Can you remind us in simple terms what a GWAS does?
Sure, think of it like a huge scan across a person's entire set of DNA, their genome. It's looking for tiny, tiny variations in the DNA code. These are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs for short.
Okay.
And the goal is to see if any specific SNPs are found more often in people who share a particular trait. In this case, the trait was having children of only one sex.
So they're searching for specific genetic markers in the mother linked to this pattern, like finding needles in a genomic haystack. Did they find any?
They did, yeah, which is pretty exciting. The GWAS identified specific maternal SNPs that were linked to having offspring of only one sex.
Really? Can you give us specifics?
Yes. They pinpointed one SNP on chromosome 10. It's located within a gene called NSUN6. And this particular SNP was significantly associated with having only female offspring.
Only girls. Okay. What else?
Then there was another SNP, this one on chromosome 18, located near a gene called TSHZ1. This one was associated with having only male offspring.
Only boys. Interesting. Any others?
There was also mention of a gene called CYP2U1 on chromosome 4, which seemed generally linked to having only one sex, whether it was all boys or all girls.
So we have actual genetic loci, specific points in the mother's DNA, potentially influencing whether she has all boys or all girls. But do we know how these genes work? What's the mechanism?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer right now is we don't really know.
Okay.
As Dr. Shavaro, the lead researcher, put it himself, he said something like, these are just initial hints. They point to a potential genetic influence on sex bias, but don't yet explain the mechanism.
So the genes are identified, but their function in this context is still a bit of a black box.
Exactly. And what's really intriguing is that these specific SNPs they found, they hadn't previously been flagged in other studies looking at related reproductive traits.
Like what kind of traits?
Like age at first period, age at menopause, general fertility issues, or even the genetics linked to age at first birth. These SNPs seem to be distinct.
So it suggests these genes might be working through entirely new biological pathways, ones we haven't connected to reproduction before.
Precisely. It suggests novel, unmediated mechanisms are at play, which from a scientific perspective is really exciting.
It absolutely is. It feels like it opens up whole new avenues for geneticists, for evolutionary biologists.
For sure. They can now start exploring how these specific heritable factors might interact with, environmental factors or the mother's own physiology to nudge the odds of having a boy or a girl, ways we just hadn't considered.
It really feels like a significant step forward in understanding the complexities of human reproduction.
I think so too.
So all this evidence, the distribution, the maternal age, the genetics, it leads to this idea they call the two-headed coin reality. Can you explain that concept a bit more?
Yeah, the two-headed coin is a good way to think about the conditional probabilities they calculated. It's about what happens next, given what's already happened.
Okay, so based on the kids you already have.
Exactly. They found, for example, if a family had already had 3 boys, the probability of their next child also being a boy wasn't 50%, it was actually 61%.
61%. Wow. And for girls?
Similarly, for families who already had 3 girls, the chance of the next child also being a girl was calculated at 58%.
So it really does mean that once you've had, say, 2 or 3 kids of the same sex, your personal coin toss for the next one seems to be weighted towards that same sex. It's not resetting to 50-50 each time.
That's what this data suggests, yes. Your family's specific odds might shift based on your history.
But hang on, how do we square this with the fact we talked about earlier? That overall, in the whole population, the ratio of boys to girls born is still very close to 50-50, Or maybe slightly more boys, right?
Yeah, around 1.05 or 1.08 boys for every girl, typically. And that holds true in this study, too. So it seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? How can individual families have these weighted coins, but the overall outcome looks random?
It does seem puzzling.
The way to think about it is like this. Imagine you have thousands and thousands of families. Some might have a coin that's, say, 55% likely to land boys. Others might have one that's 55% likely to land girls. Maybe most are very close to 50-50.
Okay.
If you average out all those slight individual family level biases across the entire population, they basically cancel each other out. The slight tendency towards boys in some families is balanced by the slight tendency towards girls in others.
I see. So the population average hides the individual variation.
Exactly. The study argues that our traditional focus on the population level ratio has, perhaps, caused us to miss this really fascinating variation happening within families. When you zoom out too far, the individual patterns get lost in the average.
That makes sense. Now, I imagine a finding like this, challenging such a long-held assumption, probably sparks some debate within the scientific community. Are there other perspectives?
Oh, absolutely. Good science always involves discussion and scrutiny. And these findings, while compelling, are definitely part of an ongoing conversation.
Who's offering a counterpoint?
Well, one example mentioned is Dr. Brendan Zeich. He is a psychologist and behavioral geneticist in Australia.
And what's his take?
He's expressed some skepticism. He actually worked on a massive study himself using Swedish birth records, millions of them. And his work apparently found no evidence of these kinds of consistent sex patterns running in families.
So conflicting results from a different large population.
Potentially, yes. And Dr. Zeich also raised a question about the study population used here, the nurses' health studies. He pointed out that it's predominantly white, about 95%, and mostly consists of nurses and other health professionals in the U.S.
And his concern is
whether that group is truly representative enough to make broad claims about biological tendencies that might apply to the general human population, which is obviously much more diverse.
that's a fair point about generalizability. It highlights why having diverse study populations is so crucial in research.
Absolutely. It underscores the ongoing nature of scientific inquiry. This study adds a really significant, well-researched piece to the puzzle, but the conversation continues, and more research in different populations is always valuable.
And speaking of the study itself, like all research, it has its strengths and weaknesses, right? The authors usually acknowledge these.
They do, and it's important we touch on those. On the plus side, the strengths are pretty clear.
Like the size.
Definitely. The huge sample size is a major strength. Also, the very detailed information they had within families' birth order, sex of each child, plus data on things like infertility treatments, lots of other health and lifestyle factors, and of course, the ability to do that GWS, the genetic analysis. That's a big advantage.
Okay, those are solid strengths. What about the limitations they noted?
They were quite transparent. One key limitation is that all the data came from the mothers. There was no genetic or other information directly from the fathers.
So only the maternal side.
Right. Although you could argue it makes the maternal findings even more intriguing, finding these effects independent of paternal contribution. Another limitation is the population itself, predominantly white U.S. women, mostly nurses. As Dr. Zeich pointed out, reproductive behaviors and potentially even biology can vary across cultures and backgrounds.
And the other limitations?
Well, the fact they are nurses means there could be unknown occupational exposures that might play a role, though that's hard to pin down. Also, just the nature of human reproduction, it spans decades. Birth rates change, makes it hard to be certain you have the complete reproductive history for every single woman.
Sure.
And finally, they couldn't distinguish half-siblings from full siblings in the data, but they argue this is likely rare enough that it wouldn't significantly skew the main results.
Okay, thanks for outlining those. It gives a balanced picture.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to our listener, why does this all matter? What's the takeaway for someone, maybe a couple, who has wondered why they seem to only have boys or only have girls?
I think for those people, this research offers maybe both some insight and perhaps some reassurance. It suggests, it might not just be random chance or coincidence playing out in their family. There could be underlying biological factors at work.
It sort of validates that feeling some parents might have had.
Exactly. And more broadly, it's just fascinating because it fundamentally challenges a biological concept, that simple 50-50 coin toss that most of us have taken for granted for generations.
It really is a powerful reminder, isn't it? That biology is almost always more intricate, more nuanced than our initial simple models suggest.
Always. There's always more layers to uncover.
So this deep dive really peels back a layer on something we thought was straightforward. What seemed like a simple random biological coin toss might actually be this much more complex game of probabilities, influenced by this blend of maternal biology, maybe genetics, maybe even interacting with family planning choices.
That sums it up well.
And it leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? If we're just now uncovering these subtle genetic and physiological tendencies affecting something as fundamental as the sex of offspring, what other aspects of human reproduction, things we still consider purely random chance, might actually have hidden biological influences waiting to be discovered?
That's the exciting frontier, isn't it? This study definitely calls for more research. We need replications in different populations. We need exploration of other potential risk factors, maybe lifestyle, diet, environmental exposure.
Chemicals, perhaps.
Possibly. And investigating how genes might interact with each other or with the environment. It's such a dynamic area of science.
It really feels like we're just scratching the surface.
I think we are. There's likely much more to learn.